Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the September 11th council meeting of the City of Mayfield Heights. Welcome everyone back from summer recess. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Balistrea?
Present.
Mr. DeJean?
Here.
Mr. Mano?
Here.
Mr. Monaco?
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Here.
Mrs. Snyder?
Here.
Mrs. Teresi?
Here.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I would like to take a moment of silence in honor of the fallen heroes that died on September 11th, 2001. Thank you. We will now move to acceptance of the minutes from our August 14th, 2023 council meeting. I hope everyone has had time to read those minutes over. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mr. Balistrea. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to those minutes?
Madam Chair, I need to abstain as I was not present at that meeting.
Okay, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There's been one abstention. These minutes have been approved as written. Does any member of council have any correspondence or announcements? Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. The Chagrin River Watershed Partnership will have its quarterly meeting on September 21st at 4 p.m. in the Gates Mills Community Center. The Mayfield Union Cemetery had its annual walkthrough on August 24th. There is a noticeable repairs and some really bad headstones and the driveway that need some estimates, and they are being prepared. Another meet is scheduled to discuss these estimates and also the budget, which has not been approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member of council have any correspondence or announcements? We will now move to reports of officers, beginning with Mayor DeSico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. It is hard to believe 22 years have passed since the September 11th attack, and the profound effect that it has had on our country. And I want to thank the chair for having a moment of silence there, and makes the Pledge of Allegiance really hit home when we say it tonight. This month, 3 new businesses opened in the city: Northern Ohio Surgery Center on Allen Bradley Drive, Cornerstone Family Office, a financial planning company, and Music and Arts selling music instruments is opened on Mayfield Road. Fortunately, we had great weather over Labor Day weekend with over 1,600 people visiting the pool. I'm pleased to report that 2,500 family passes were purchased, 360 individual passes, and 171 senior passes were sold during the opening season. So we've got a lot of great feedback, and I want to thank Sean and his team and the whole service department for all the work they've done in getting it up and running, getting it ready for our residents, and really got off on a good foot. So the garage sale last Friday and Saturday was another success, with nearly 60 residents registering for the event. There was a map online, and I think there was pretty good participation in the event. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions? Moving to Director of Law, Mr. Schmidlin.
I'm proud to report that the law director is celebrating his 50th wedding anniversary on a cruise with his wife, Mickey. He sent me in his place, and he promised me that everyone would behave tonight.
Okay, we'll do that for you.
No further report.
Thank you. All right, Director of Finance, Mrs. Fagan.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a very quick update. We are starting the 2024 budget process. You will see two items on tonight's agenda that touch on revenues for 2024. Budget sheets on the expenditure side went out to department heads last week, so hopefully they've been busy working on those. I expect those back by the end of the month, by the 27th, back to finance. At that point, we'll compile everything together and put together one compiled budget. The goal is to have it to council on the agenda by the first meeting in November so that it can go 3 readings if necessary. That's all I have.
Any questions for Mrs. Fagan? Thank you. We will now move to reports of committees, commissions, and boards, beginning with Mr. Monaco, Building Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. Finance and Audit, Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I have this evening is I want to refer Resolution Number 2023-85 to the Finance Committee, as well as as well as 2023-21. If Madam President would like to refer that to the Finance Committee, I would appreciate it, and I will organize those meetings.
Okay, thank you. Legislative Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no report. The Legislative Committee met on June 19th. Council has the minutes. The legislation discussed at this meeting is on the agenda tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Public Works and Service, Mr. Balstreo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No official meeting report, but I would like to read a report to give council an update on the road program and the sidewalk program. As far as the road program update, they are finishing the north side of Indiana curbs and aprons. They need to finish the south side, and then we'll put the top coat of asphalt down in that area. The finish time will be in the next couple weeks, pending receiving the top coat of asphalt, and that area will be completed. Then the road team will then move to the Long Ridge area to complete needed work there. That should take a week or two to complete. The summit curbs, aprons that needed to be redone are complete. The full tear out of Crestwood has begun this week. That will take 100 days to complete by contract, which takes that completion date into December. As far as the sidewalk program goes, all the streets that were slated for repair work, those sidewalks were also done. If you remember, we were very aggressive with the 2023 sidewalk program. And this year we listed many streets, as you know. We came up just a little short in terms of dollars, and 3 streets did not get completed, and we'll hold those off for the 24 program and the 24 budget. And they were Bonnie, Jackie, and Golden Gate, and those will be included next year. Some blocks on East and West Minor were in need of repair, and I'm telling council this because it was due to some gas company work that was done a couple years back. And GPD found that the blocks are settling because of the work that they did, and have been in contact with the utility company, and they will repair those. So they have become trip hazards, so in case anyone gets a call on East or West Minor, those blocks will be repaired, but they're going to be repaired by the utility company. And as I said, I had no official report this evening, but I added on the agenda tonight's a resolution to approve monies to GPD to perform the pavement condition ratings, the PCRs. This would amend the original contract by about $27,000. The report would take about 3 weeks to assess the streets and finalize the report. And I'll call a meeting thereafter then to review the report and make recommendations to council for the 2024 road program. Hopefully, this meeting or meetings will coincide with our budget proposals as well. I urge council to pass it this evening, so GPD has stated they may be able to even start the PCRs this week. Last year, I asked for a committee of the whole meeting when finalizing the road program, and I know it takes a great deal of time, and there's a lot of questions, so Madam President, I'll probably ask for a committee of the whole meeting when we have that all finalized, instead of having a public works. We'll have an initial public works meeting, but then the finalization, I think all of council should get together for a committee of the whole meeting. That's what we did last year, and I think it was very successful. And that's my report.
Okay, I just have a couple questions for you, real quick. There was a resident that called on Wharton and said that his sidewalk was marked already, looking like it was going to be replaced. Where was that on the sidewalk program?
Wharton? I don't think they were on the program this week, or this year. They were done when the street was repaired.
Right, so can we look at,
So-
I'll give the address to someone to go look at why they marked his sidewalk.
We can have the
I'm
service
not so
department
sure.
just check it,
Okay,
because there shouldn't be any work done on Wharton. I mean,
Yeah,
that needs to be
right.
completed, as far as
Yeah.
I know.
but I just got this
Okay.
email from him, or a phone call from
I
him
could
yesterday.
forward that to Mr. Brunello or the service department, they could check it out.
And then how long does the PCR program take?
About 3 weeks to assess the streets. They'll have the engineers go out, assess the streets, and then to compile the report with the ratings, about 3 weeks. So if we got them out now, we're looking at, second week in October,
Okay.
the scheduled meeting.
And then when you and I walked on Summit, we talked about having an early Public Works and Service meeting. So I'd like for you to call one within the next few weeks if you can. Okay? Thank you.
Madam President, I have a question for Mr.
Mr. DeJohn?
Thank you. Couple things. So we do not replace sidewalks that have cracks in them, only sidewalks that are raised and are a tripping hazard. Is that correct?
Trip
As
hazards.
I did receive that and wanted to make sure the residents knew that. In regards to the condition ratings, I sat on Public Works with you several years back, and we did ask Mr. Gerson at that time to do it a little earlier, but at that time, he told us that we couldn't do it until after the winter, or at least late February, early March. So just was wondering what the change is now that we're doing it so early. And because the streets obviously are going to become more damaged over the winter and going to be hard to assess them. So, I mean, we're going to do double work on those? Do it now and then again back then?
No,
Or-
the whole impetus was to do it early so we could get the streets assessed and get, those to council for approval, get the monies allocated, and go out on bid early in the year for those particular streets. If you remember, by doing that late, we didn't get streets done.
Yep.
Because it took too long to get, crews on site, and some of those jobs weren't even bid out. So that's the whole thing of pushing it to, the later part of this year, so we can get this going, first part going out on bids early in the new year, after the budgets, and then we're set to go when the weather breaks.
But that was at the engineer's recommendation, so I'd like to know what changed from that engineer till now. Maybe, is GDP here, Mr. Chuney? Maybe he can answer that for us.
Mr.
Push that? There we go. Okay, thank you. It's pencils up, right? You have to pick a moment in time. All the streets are going to deteriorate as you go. They're not going to get better, so we have to pick a time frame. I agree 100% that we should be doing it now. All right, is it going to deteriorate over the winter? Yes, they all do. All right, but if we pick a spot now, and it was advised by the council president and Mr. Balestrea that we do it now so that we could plan ahead when you're doing your budgets and pick the streets now, rather than waiting till the spring. Pick the streets in the spring, by the time you bid it, it's, the end of the summer. So, nothing's changed. It's when you pick the pencil up, it's a moment of time. You understand?
I just-
And I agree with the time frame
Mr.
now. I
DeJohn,
think this is
hold on.
better.
Mr. Balestra.
Since Mr. Chuney's up there, I also asked him during my report to give us an update on the DIE program as well, if you
I
would
know I
allow that.
contacted him today, and he said he would speak on all of these subjects. So apparently, he already did with you. So, Mr. Cheney, could you give us an update on that as well?
Okay. The August 14th storm, we had 59 total residents, total complaints of basement flooding of some kind or another, right? So 59. We've created a map and showed where they are, where they're clustered. Some are one-on-one streets. A couple of streets have two, and there are a few streets, Marnell and one, and Bellingham there that had several on that street. So obviously, we're going to concentrate on those where we had several. We had the county come out, and they've TV'd all the mainline sewers in front of those homes. We just received the videos late last week. The county reviews it first, then they send it to us. And we're in the process of reviewing that now. We have contacted AECom, who is in our proposal as the subcontractor to do the dye testing. And part of that dye testing also is some of the streets we didn't do to make sure we're clean on our side. And that would be Lander, Longwood, Temple, and Maywood. All of those, we're going to dye test to make sure that our pipes are not cross-connected, or we don't have any issues. The other one that they did all those other streets, Marnell, Hawthorne, and all those in there. So there's 4 streets they never did. This follows up with that. We are compiling the list to dye test which homes. Obviously, the 59 complainers, we will, but we are adding to that list so that we would dye test those as well. And within the next couple of weeks, he's going to start that. Obviously, he's going to be contacting the residents, letting them know he's coming out onto the property and doing that dye testing work. There are a couple of things we've already found out that we're pursuing, and one of them, we were just out there, the Public Works Department and myself on Friday with Cleveland Water Department. We think there's a water line leak both on Marnell and Mayfair. It's leaking underground, going right into the sewer. We just don't know where it's at yet. So once we find that, I'm not saying that caused the flooding, but it didn't help, right? It's filling the sewer up with water that shouldn't be there. So sometimes water mains break underground, and there's a pipe next to it that blows part of the pipe out, and now it's leaking right into that pipe. It doesn't bubble up into the surface. Cleveland Water ain't going to fix it. They don't know it's like that. So the camera work that the county did showed us that, and we're going to be, well, again, we were out there on Friday with them, pointing that out to them, and hopefully we'll get those breaks. Obviously, our pipe is broken, so they're only going to fix the water line. We're going to fix our pipe then once they fix the water line. So we are doing things. The county, when they came out, they looked at all the individual laterals from the street to the house, all right, on everybody that complained. If they had a backflow preventer there, they won't go through the backflow preventer. They don't want to take liability for it, so the county won't. So those homes maybe didn't get a full camera work on all of their laterals, storm and sanitary. So that's basically where we're at right now. And it's not a process. It takes, you're not going to do it overnight, but we're going to continue to pursue it.
Alcester was part of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my other question was about Washington, the complaint over on Washington.
The complaint on Washington, we are pursuing with the law department. We found we also TV'd the line there too as well, and I haven't reviewed that tape yet. Washington should not be a problem. It's not like the Marnell area where there's a big watershed and a lot of streets go in there. Washington is a head-end sewer, meaning it's the beginning of the sewer at Mayfield and goes north to Ridgebury. So there's not a lot of water being put in there to flood people out, is what I'm saying. So, and these houses weren't that far from Mayfield that flooded, so there's something else going on there.
Okay.
And we're pursuing that as we speak. I mean, it's not a size of the sewer problem there, in my professional opinion. You know, there are other areas where 10, 12 streets all funnel into one, and then goes off into Lyndhurst there on Marnell, and that's a different issue. Might be a capacity issue, which we're looking into. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Mr. DeJohn?
Yes, can we have some kind of guarantee that this condition rating's done by the end of 2023?
Well, we put in our proposal, we would do the field work in 2 weeks and then do the analysis after that. That's where the 3 weeks come from.
So
That
it will
That
be-
was in our proposal, which would, if you pass it tonight, that's basically the contract, yes.
Okay, and if it's not done, then,
Oh, we're going to get it done for you, yeah.
all right, thank you.
Well, if it pours rain every day, or if it snows, or something like that happens, all right, which I don't think it's going to happen now, so this is a good time of the year to get it done. But yes, we will have it done in the 3 weeks we put in our proposal.
But Mr. Monaco?
Mr. Chuni, can you give me an update on what the repairs on Mayfield, on Long Ridge and Marshfield, when they're going to take place? I was originally told July, then September. Now it looks like that may not happen in September.
They're leaving it to last, as it was reported. And they have about 2 weeks left on Indiana and only a week on Indiana. And then they're going to pave all those streets in there. There's 5 streets to be paved in there. Then they're going to Long Ridge, Eastondale, and Fairhaven, So it is last. It will be at the end of this month.
The end of this month?
Yes,
Thank you.
correct. And it's about a week and a half's worth of work there.
Mr. Pellestrero?
Just so council knows, I know I've heard back from one, possibly 2 residents where the county has come out and checked their lines, and have found, I know one resident was for sure on Washington, where they found that the T's at the street was not making a connection. So it was on the resident's property, and the county is repairing those. So I did get word that one of those
That's what I'm saying.
one of
There's
those
something else
residents
going
was
on there, right.
was very happy that, we called the county on his behalf, and they found that problem was on his property, and the county was, I don't know what the ramifications are as far as what they will fix and what they will fix, but since it was near the street, they were fixing his T there, and it was broken. So they are repairing. And I think was one other person I heard of that was farther on down on the lawn, and they're taking care of that for the resident as well. So it's good that at least these folks are finding out that the property it has some issues, and it's not just, the city, so.
What about the resident on Beeham, the street over there? Was that taken care of?
I didn't hear the street.
The city was going to go do the work, but then we ended up giving it to a contractor. Beeham. The resident over on Beeham that had, oh, Drayton, I'm sorry.
Oh, Drayton?
Yeah.
Drayton is being fixed tomorrow or Wednesday. It's on the schedule
Okay.
to repair the road. We still have our road plates out there that are the Public Works Department. Their driveway and their sidewalk's been fixed. It's the road itself. And we did put an extra plate out there, made it wider for her to get in and out. And Perk has taken care of it. It's on the schedule. He told me last Friday it was either Tuesday or Wednesday this week. And I didn't talk to him today, so I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow or Wednesday. It'll be done by the end of the week.
Okay, perfect. Are there any further questions? All right, thank you. Thank you for your report. Recreation and Parks Committee, Mr. Mano.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no reports this evening.
Thank you. Safety and Transportation, Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On August 23rd, Mr. Monaco and I met with Chief Mealy, Captain Paquette, Renee Augustine, our HR manager, and Finance Director Dana Scully were in the meeting, and it was at 8:15 a.m. in the morning. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss a new dispatch supervisor position, a non-sworn employee, the creation of an additional lieutenant position, and the hiring of one additional patrol officer. We learned from Chief Mealy that the department has not hired a new officer for the last 21 years. Thus, the same number of officers have patrolled the streets for the past 21 years, though the volume of service calls have increased. This factor has been felt by the officers, who are much busier now than they were in the past. Most often, there are 5 officers, occasionally 6 on shift. From 2020 up until now, the calls have roughly doubled. The types of calls they respond to include shots fired, drugs, weapon offenses, guns, etc. And for some of the calls that were received, the entire shift responds, and it can take hours to resolve. Consequently, officers are tied up dealing with service calls longer than they used to be. Currently, there are 38 sworn officers on staff. There are 4 shifts with 4 platoons. 2 of the officers are on duty each day for 12 hours, while 2 officers are off those days. There are a minimum of 5 officers on shift, including a supervisor, which is the officer in charge. 6 officers are assigned to a shift, but typically there's 1 officer that is off for a variety of reasons, for vacation, training, or school purposes. The chief shared a 12-month look back, did a great PowerPoint for Mr. Monaco and I. Out of 730 shifts, 529 shifts were done with 5 officers on staff, which is the minimum. Chief has proposed assigning a lieutenant to each of the 4 shifts, and in order to do this, one of the lieutenants in community operations would become a sergeant position. Currently, Detective or Sergeant Oberdoster oversees the communications division, and they would like to turn his role into a civilian position. Sergeant Oberdoster is due to retire at the end of the year, and the change in his position would take a substantial pay cut. Chief Mealy plans to move the sergeant's position into the Community Operations Office, and this would free up a lieutenant's position to be moved to road patrol. Another part of the proposal would consist of making one of the sergeants a lieutenant, providing a second lieutenant on shift. Autumn Grabowski has recently resigned. Consequently, there are no plans to fill her position. This is rather lengthy. Her benefits combined are approximately $104,000, and that would make up for the cost of living and an additional patrol officer. So Captain Piquet also echoed the words of Chief Mealy regarding the Sergeant Oberdoster's position as a great fit to supervise dispatch. He has confidence in the department's ability to continue without the clerk's position and maintaining the responsibilities for CALIA. He's also reiterated that the benefits the proposed positions would bring concerning overtime and the increase in the department's efficiency. So the chief is really looking for one new dispatch supervisor position, a creation of a lieutenant position, and the hiring of 1 additional patrol officer. The chief is here with us this evening if you would like more information about our committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tressi. Are there any questions? I believe the chief would like to have a committee of the whole meeting before the next council meeting. This will be on the agenda. So if you want to come prepared with questions, he'll be here. We'll have a meeting, probably 6:30.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you. Board of Zoning Appeals, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. The Board of Zoning of Appeals will meet here tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. There are 2 items on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Moving to Planning Commission, Mr. Balstrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Planning Commission was in summer recess. We didn't have any activity, so I have no report.
Thank you. This time, we will proceed to the public portion of the meeting. Pursuant to City Code, each person will be allotted 5 minutes to speak with a maximum of 30 minutes for the entire public portion. If you are here in connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address council. Please note that this is not opportunity for debate or slighted comments. If you would like to be heard this evening, please fill out a form located at the table of the public entrance. During the public portion, I will call each person wishing to speak to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record. It is now 7:30, and I will open up the public portion. I would like to bring up Mr. Singh.
Good evening, America. My name is Singh. My daughter and I are born-again Mayfield Heights residents. We came back after 17 years, and we made a huge investment on Chelmsford. We like the place. It's very accessible. All the services are very accessible. A couple of things I wanted to touch on is, one, I noticed when we were crisscrossing to buy a house that we have an aging population. Number two, we are losing population. If you look around the room, I'm the youngest American in the room. Do you realize that, how bad we are? And that's my first point. I want to know whether there is a plan to retain and attract new members or new residents. Now, my daughter is a psychiatrist, and every year she was telling me about 250 to 300 residents pour into Cuyahoga County, and none of them even have heard of Mayfield Heights before. They've heard of Bedford, and they've heard of Euclid, but none of them have heard of Mayfield Heights. So maybe we're going to do something to publicize Mayfield Heights. In fact, 3 weeks ago, I met a lady. She's a pathologist with Cleveland Clinic, and she was told to avoid Mayfield Heights. So she's renting an apartment in Beechwood because of the snow. And I say there's no difference between the snow in Mayfield Heights and Beechwood. So I think we need to do some community relations program or something. My next item is I noticed that I'm also the best looking guy in the City Hall. So maybe we should do something to attract and retain minority representation. I look at all the commissions, and I think there's no minority representation. And whereas the demographics have changed, after 17 years, I also see now there's a large Hispanic population. So I don't even know whether you've done any studies to find that out. There's a large Nepali population. In fact, I did write to the mayor to offer my services. I'm a former councilman in Woodmere, and I do not know what are your policies about volunteers. I was offering myself to maybe start. I don't know. I noticed there's no community relations commission or committee, and I think the only person I met during the Unity Days was the police chief, and I got a chance to speak to him 2 times, and I was shocked that we only have 1 K9. Whereas there are multiple entries and exits into the city. And the other point is the Taj Mahal we have built. Anybody has been to the Taj Mahal? Our new aquatic center. I personally like it. None of my neighbors like it. I hear a lot of complaints, especially those people who live by the pool. But what attracted my attention is that the initial budget was $20 million, and just based on reading articles in the newspapers, it's gone up now to $45 million. Is there a limit? Because when I bought my house, I had a budget, and I only projected maybe 15-20% to go beyond my budget. And I think it was the engineer was talking about basements getting flooded, and I see that is a problem of Chelmsford too. I, in fact, have to dug out my own to lay new pipes, and we found that the clay pipes were very old, and they were all blocked up. So maybe you can inform us, is there any plan to replace and to reduce basement flooding? And the other thing is we had a big, long, blackout. I think it was longer than the one we had originally in 2003. And I called the City Hall a few times, they couldn't help me. And I was wondering if there is any money allocated to bury the transmission lines so we can get rid of this seasonal problem. So those are my only few questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Thank you for bringing all these points up. All right. Mrs. Talbin, Kathy.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Telbin, and I live at 6470 Gates Mills Boulevard. My comment has to do with political lawn signs. Mayfield Heights has an ordinance about various types of lawn signs, including political. There are now questions about this ordinance, and it may need to be reviewed and updated. However, until that happens, what is currently in writing is this ordinance. Its elements are common practice. The sign cannot be placed in a lawn prior to 30 days from the date of the election for which it's intended, and it can't be displayed no more than 10 days after the election. One of City Council's roles is to write ordinances. And as a candidate for City Council, I want to go on record that I plan to follow the ordinance that's currently in place. So you aren't going to be seeing my signs until October 7th. What this all brings up for me, though, is that there are some process issues that need to be looked at along with the ordinance itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Talbot. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard this evening? Okay, I just wanted to make a comment real quick to Mr. Singh. We do have a community relations person in our city hall, and she is here this evening, Ms. Tammy Kleins, and she does keep in touch with all the things that are going around in the community. So maybe you would like to get in touch with her. We don't have a commission or board, but she is our community relations person. Okay? Thank you. It is now 7:35, and I will close the public portion. Resolution number 2023-81, Mr. Schmidlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2023-81, a resolution authorizing the mayor to amend the contract with MAGAAS LLC a second time for the purchase and installation of a pavilion for use at the Mayfield Heights Aquatic and Community Center to add painting and metal siding to the outside of the structure and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balstrea, second by Mr. Mano, or, I'm sorry, by Mr. Monaco. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yes.
Mr. DeJean?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes?
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano and second by Mrs. Sabetta. This resolution is a contract to add the metal roofing to the pavilion structure located by the new pool for the cost that would not exceed $3,630. It was also determined to add painting and metal siding to the structure, which was $2,829. In your packet, you should have received the two invoices from Magus. One was for the painting of the pavilion by the new pool, which was $979, and one was for $1,850 for a part of the roofing gables. I know we discussed this earlier, that we wanted this metal roofing to go on this particular pavilion. I believe this was talked about over the summer, so I want members of council, if you have any questions, to go over this. We can do that. Mrs. Tracy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So in a different resolution, we paid for the metal roof, which was additional, am I correct? And now we're paying for painting? Is that,
So, Mr. Ward, can you please come up and answer these questions?
I thought we had this at, we approved the metal roof instead of a wood roof.
Yes, we did approve a metal roof, but the sides we forgot to do, or it was just not communicated, so that we had to go back and do that extra part. So that's the roof, and then there was some additional painting that needed to be done.
And I get that, Mr. Ward, but, I mean, when you're doing these things, you can't forget to do part of the job. It should have all been in one, the metal roof and the painting of the pavilion, not instead of piecemealing it. That's just my opinion, but we
Got it.
just did this a few weeks ago for the metal roof, which we wanted, and now we're going to paint the pavilion. It seems silly to go back and do it again. We should have put it all in one, as one project, in my opinion. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Mr. Monaco.
Sean, I'm looking at the handout that I have here, and it says repaint, trim after already painting. So the trim was already painted, and we are painting it again, and this is brand new?
So we were painting it, and then we had a change that we needed to make. It just wasn't looking right, so we decided to go with a different route, so he had to paint over some of the stuff that he already did. So,
Didn't we pick a color from the beginning that was the right color?
Yes, there's a couple colors on there, yes, and so it didn't look right. The architect wanted it to be a different, the beam was painted a wrong color. So we went back and repainted the beam, among other things.
So who painted it the wrong color, and why are we responsible for repainting it?
The painter did what he was asked to do. And so we went back and there was a change. Oftentimes, there's a mistake happens, and you have to go back and you want to make it right. We want to do this once, I get it, but sometimes that doesn't always happen.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ward, I just have a quick question about the gable ends. The gavelum with J-channel trim, would they not know to put that on there?
So the metal roof that was done was just the roof. So the sides were not on that original quote. So when he came back to do the sides, that is all included.
Okay. All right, are there any further questions for Mr. Ward? Thank you. All right. Is there a motion to approve? Oh, I'm sorry. We'll call the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJean,
No.
Mr. Monaco,
No.
Mrs. Teresi,
Nope.
Mr. Balestrea,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. It's a 4-3 vote. Motion is carried. Moving to resolution number 2023-82, Mr. Schmidlin.
Resolution number 2023-82, a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certify them to the county fiscal officer.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Monaco,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. DeJean,
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea and second by Mr. Mano. This resolution pertains to the process in which the council approves the tax budget, and then it is sent to the county. The county utilizes the tax budgets to determine the city's property tax rate. This resolution confirms the tax rates by the county. Are there any questions from council? Okay. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Balestrea,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. DeJean,
Yes.
Mr. Monaco,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. This resolution has been adopted. Resolution number 2023-83.
Resolution number 2023-83, a resolution requesting the county fiscal officer to advance real property taxes from the proceeds of tax levies pursuant to Section 321.34 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So move.
Moved by Mr. Monaco and second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Monaco,
Yes.
Mr. DeJean,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mrs. Tressi. This resolution will authorizes the city to participate in the county's tax advance program, which allows the county to send property tax monies received by the city monthly rather than twice a year. This legislation is also passed annually. Any questions about this resolution? Mr. DeJean?
This is something we've always done.
This is something we do every year, yes.
Okay, when it says advanced, do they have the money already?
Yes.
Okay.
Otherwise, they would hold on to it, only give it to us twice a year, so it's just getting it to us a little bit earlier.
I understand. Thank you.
Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Balistraya?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Dijon?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. This resolution has been approved. Resolution number 2023-84, Mr. Schmidlin.
Resolution number 2023-84, a resolution rejecting all bids received for the purchase and installation of a generator at City Hall in accordance with the bid specifications, authorizing the rebid of the project and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Manos, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balistraya?
Yes.
Mr. Dijon?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Balistraya, second by Mr. Monaco. As it states in the resolution, this would simply just reject the bids and resubmit for the project. Are there any questions? Mr. Dijon?
Do we know why?
Mrs. Fagan?
Absolutely.
It's too high.
I apologize, I jumped in there a little too
That's okay.
quickly. The one, we received one bid and it was well over the engineer's estimate.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. All right, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Dijon?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Balistraya?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, this motion has been adopted. So resolution number 2023-85, Mr. Schmidlin.
Resolution number 2023-85, a resolution authorizing and approving change management number 074 to the agreement with the Albert M. Higley Company for the construction of the Mayfield Heights Aquatic Center and the Community Center, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. This resolution was asked to be referred to the Finance Committee, so I'd like to place this on first reading. Okay, we will move to ordinances, beginning with 2023-16. Mr. Schmidlin.
Do we want to add Resolution 2023-86 at this time, since we're in the resolutions
Oh,
for the PCR program?
well, where's that one at? I don't have it in front of me here. Oh, yeah, I have that on here. So we're placing that on first reading, but we're going to, I need a motion to add resolution number 2023-86 to the agenda.
So moved.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Balistraya, second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to add this to the agenda.
Mr. Balistraya?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Dijon?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
And Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Resolution number 2023-86, Mr. Schmidlin.
Resolution number 2023-86, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an amendment to the agreement with GDP, or DBA GDP Group, Glaus, Pyle, Schomer, Burns, and DeHaven, DBA GDP Group, to provide professional engineering services for the 2023 roadway PCR project in the city and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Balistraya. Second by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Sorry. Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Dijon?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balistraya?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Balistraya, second by Mrs. Sabetta. This was a recommendation to add this to tonight's agenda. We heard from Mr. Balistraya during his Public Works and Service report, and also from Mr. Chuney, that this would move our program up so that we're prepared for next year. Does any member of council have any questions or comments? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Ballestrea?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. DeJean?
Yes.
And Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Resolution number 2023-86 has been approved. We will now move to ordinances, beginning with ordinance 2023-16. Mr. Schmidlin.
Ordinance number 2023-16, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter to a memorandum of understanding with Apex Dermatology pertaining to the Job Retention Grant Program and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Tressi and second by Mr. Monaco. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Ballestrea?
Yes.
Mr. DeJean?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano and second by Mrs. Tressi. Apex Dermatology has applied for a grant from the city as an incentive to retain jobs within the city. Mr. Schmidlin, can you give us any further detail regarding this ordinance?
I really can't, Madam Chair. This is something you have to
That's okay.
defer to Paul for.
Mrs. Fagan, do you want to add?
We have been in conversation with this company for many months. They have applied and submitted their grant application for the job retention grant. And meeting those qualifications, the amount that their breakdown would be is broken out in the ordinance.
It is.
I don't see it in there.
Hold on one second, let me
I
grab that.
apologize. Maybe it's not in the ordinance.
What paragraph is that in?
In the MOU.
It's in the, this.
In the MOU, it does state that it is for the 2-year period. And when that starts, and that the percentage of the income tax withholding that is being considered.
Mr. Ballestrea.
I guess a question for either the finance director or the mayor. Same conditions as previously agreed to with other grants that were applied to?
Well, yeah, it's
Similar or-
spelled out in the, yeah.
Nothing out of the ordinary then?
Mayor?
Yeah, it falls under the parameters of our job creation and retention grant.
Thank you.
Mrs. Tressi.
Mayor, does this company or any company have to be in our city for a certain amount of time before they can apply for this grant? Because they've really just opened. Well, they've been,
They were across the street for a long time.
so they're using, okay, both locations from where they were originally to where they are now. Is that correct?
There's no,
Mrs. Fagan.
I don't think there is a time frame as how long they have to be in the city first, as long as they're bringing jobs here. We're not going to penalize them if they're a company for just getting here and bringing their jobs with them. We don't have a set amount of time that they have to be here first. As long as they're bringing those jobs here, and then we verify those jobs year after year and their payroll year after year, and what that grant would be then.
How many employees do they have currently? You knew I was going to ask that question.
Well, I don't have the number. I had the total dollar amount of the payroll. I didn't have the number of employees. I may have it here, though. One second. And the grant is based on the amount of increased payroll for them also.
I know they're looking to increase their payroll.
Mr. Ballestrea.
Oh, you know that already, Mike?
Yeah,
Oh, have you spoken to them?
they're looking to increase. I'm a patient.
Can you please speak into the microphone?
I was a patient there, so they were looking to increase the number of employees they had in the new building. That was just told to me as an aside, so I know they're looking to add quite a few employees. But no numbers.
Mr. DeJean.
Thank you, Madam President. So help me understand this. So they were originally in Landerbrook, I believe. And they purchased a piece of property in Landerbrook next to the post office. They spent millions and millions of dollars to build that, and now they're coming to us for a grant? Help me understand how that makes any sense.
Mayor?
It makes sense that the city is incentivizing them staying here and keeping their payroll here. I mean, I think that's pretty much common sense, considering we have a job retention and creation grant, and it's very important that we keep these jobs here and keep these companies here. So I'm not sure that question, I'm not sure why you're confused as to why we would offer them an incentive to stay here.
Mayor, I have a question for you. Did they reach out prior to the building of their new building? Because lots of times people come to us before they would leap
They-
and make a big purchase.
They inquired while they were at the old building some time ago. It was a while ago, before they even
Before
talked.
they
Yeah,
dug, or they broke ground and all that,
yeah, right,
before COVID?
yeah.
Okay.
And I did find the answer on the number of employees.
Thank you.
Currently, before they had the new headquarters, it was 48, and they're looking at an additional 68 over the next 3 years.
Mr. DeJong?
Thank you.
Couple things. So we still don't know what the final amount of the grant is? How much is it?
Mr. DeShawn, it will be based on the amount of withholding tax dollars they pay every year. So I do not know the exact number without knowing what those exact withholding grant dollars will be. It's based on a percentage of those dollars.
Okay. So, and my answer to Mayor DeSico is you wouldn't build a multi-million-dollar building. Maybe you asked us for the grant. We didn't approve it back before they started it. So what guarantee was it for them to get this grant? So, and it seemed kind of odd to me that after 10 years, or building this building, that they would move before 10 years. So I think they're kind of in a hard spot here, that they have to stay. How are they going to move? They built this multi-million-dollar business. I don't see them moving from here. So, and we never guaranteed them anything, so maybe they had discussions with you. I don't ever remember it coming to council, but
It
this
didn't have
will-
to come to council. It was, do you have an economic, a grant available for job retention and creation? And it's right there. They can go look at it.
Mrs. Fagan, do we have a lot of these grants available?
We're getting more and more interest because of the economy out there. It's something that we're kind of, the law director, the mayor, the building commissioner, and myself are doing as like economic development by committee, and we're addressing these as a company comes forward. So we do have a few. This is the only one that is job retention at this point, or job creation.
Okay. I guess my concern would be if we give them all away and we have a company that has a lot more employees that we really want to retain. It just worries me that not that they're not good for our community, of course they are.
Right.
I'm just concerned if there's a big company that comes to us, we're really going to want to retain them.
That is something that I have said all along, from the first one that came in during my tenure, when it was for First Mainland, and council was very, approved that. It's always based on the dollars that we have, the non-tax revenues that we have. So we have looked at our non-tax revenues, we've taken a look at that, seen what we are comfortable using towards this program. Again, we are giving a 20% of withholding tax dollars, so their withholding tax dollars will be increasing dramatically. So we're giving a portion of those withholding dollars back to them after we know what they are. So we are receiving more funds in the big picture. Financially, we'll be farther ahead.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Mayor, I'm sorry.
I can't believe it's even a discussion as to whether we want to keep a company here in the climate that is out there now. Corporate parks and offices are bailing left and right, and we have people who want to stay here. And I can't believe that council would even question trying to keep them here and trying to solidify our tax base as far as that income goes. We've had the discussions about this for a long time. We've told council about all the grants and all the people who have come to us, and we have discussed them. And it's kind of weird that all of a sudden it's a surprise now, so.
Mr. DeJohn?
Again, what's confusing to me, which is not confusing, they built this $1 million building. Why would we think that they're going to move out and go somewhere else after building this building? It just doesn't make sense to me. And to compare this with Mayland properties, Mayland was a blighted property, and we saw the need to help this developer. So.
What doesn't make sense is that you're gonna pick and choose which company that you're gonna say, well, you know what, you're gonna stay here anyway. We're not gonna show you we value your presence here. That doesn't make any sense.
Mr. Monaco, did you have something?
Stay out of this one.
Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJean?
No.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Ordinance number 2023-16 has been approved. Ordinance number 2023-17, Mr. Schmidlin.
Madam Chair, ordinance number 2023-17, an ordinance authorizing an agreement with the Cuyahoga County Land Reutilization Corporation to purchase tax delinquent in the city and declaring an emergency.
I'm going to place this on first reading because further due diligence is needed, including a site visit. So we'll wait for that to happen, and then we'll bring it back to council.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Monaco.
I believe that there is a word missing here because it says to purchase tax delinquent, should it say property in the city? It says tax delinquent in the city. Tax delinquent what?
I thought I was missing my vision there.
But
Thank
back
you.
here, it doesn't say that.
Okay.
If you read that.
It says land on the resolution.
No, but I'm talking about,
Yeah.
The agenda, there was a word missing. You're
Yeah,
correct.
land.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Monaco.
thank you.
Okay, ordinance number 2023 oh, Mrs. Sabetta.
Right. Well, I'm talking on the ordinance. On the third paragraph, it says, whereas CCLRC has offered to sell the vacant lane to the city. Should it say land?
Land.
Should.
We'll make that correction before the next
I
meeting.
will tell Paul to fix his spell check.
It was a short week last week, and I think Paul was cranking out legislation on a pretty tight time schedule.
Okay. All right, so 2 corrections for Mr. Murphy.
He's got a B+ so far.
All right, ordinance number 2023-18, Mr. Schmidlin.
Ordinance number 2023-18, an ordinance enacting Chapter 961 of the codified ordinances of the city titled Indigent Decedent Policy.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, second by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJean?
No.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestrea, and second by Mrs. Sabetta. The purpose of this ordinance is to provide for the cremation of indigents or the cremation of indigent claimed by an indigent person. The indigent decedent policy is enacted to comply with the provisions of the Ohio Revised Code to the cremation indigent residents of the city who are not claimed by any person. This is an application policy for this ordinance, and our administration would be the one appointed to be respondently able to enact in this indigent decedent policy. It's a lot. Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you. And I'm going to qualify that I'm a licensed funeral director in the state of Ohio, and I do know this law. All right, so we'll begin there. The first thing is we had talked about this many years ago and came up with a ordinance for this, and I don't understand why we're looking at this again. And the previous ordinance said that the mayor would have the authority. I don't remember any burial rights in that we had to bury these remains, and I don't believe the law states that, but I'd like to look into that further. And also, the mayor was supposed to solicit the least expensive cremation in the Northeast Ohio area, and there are many discount cremation facilities out there. And it doesn't say any of this in there, and it did in the previous ordinance. So, do we have the previous ordinance? I don't see it here, but I would like to suggest putting this on readings so we can revisit this more and find that out.
Madam Chair?
Mayor.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm a licensed funeral director in the state of Ohio also. Yeah, this was just, Paul was trying to bring it more within the Ohio code and bring more of that language into it, making sure we complied with it. But yeah, if you want to, I have no problem with that. And as a matter of fact, I believe it was you who chose or brought the cremation company, right, to us, and that's the one we're using. This is, knock on wood, we haven't used it, had to in a while. We were on a roll there, which was a reason why we brought up the original discussion. Yeah, but if you want to put this on first reading and talk about all the specifics of it, that's fine. I have no problem with that. I just want to make sure we have something in place, which we still do, and you're right. And as far as burial goes, we are looking into some place to put them, the cremains. We want to put them someplace so they're not just stored here at City Hall. And that is going to be hopefully with a cemetery where if any, in the future, if any family members came forward and did want to claim those ashes, they could at a cost to them, and it would be between them and the cemetery. So we are working on a cemetery space that is very inexpensive to at least hold those ashes until, hopefully family members come forward or keep them there in perpetuity.
Madam
Okay.
Chair?
Mrs. Tressi?
Mayor, where have we been taking these cremations up until now? Because I don't remember it being at Knollwood Cemetery in the past and on our last ordinance. So where have
We
you?
have not, no, they're
We
still
haven't
here.
had any?
No, they're still here. We have not taken them anywhere
Here being,
in City Hall.
ooh, okay.
We still have the ashes here, yeah.
Okay.
We have not had an agreement with the cemetery.
Wow, okay. Well, thanks. I agree we should put it on readings.
Are they paying rent?
Me too.
Yeah, do they pay rent? Mr. Monaco wants to know.
So maybe, Mrs. Fagan, if we can get a copy of the old ordinance and also the minutes from that meeting, because it was a lengthy meeting. So we could review all that before, like within the next few weeks. And we'll place this on first reading.
Thank you.
All right, ordinance number 2023-19, Mr. Murphy.
In Mr. Murphy's place,
Oh, I'm sorry,
although
Mr.
he may be a
Mr.
licensed funeral director, I don't know. 2023-19, an ordinance enacting Chapter 155 of the codified ordinances of the city titled Naming Rights to Government Building and Property and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn. Second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Monaco. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balistrea?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. DeJean?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJean and second by Mr. Mano. The purpose of this ordinance is to establish guidelines for the naming of the government-owned building, portions of wings or public outdoor space on government-owned properties in Mayfield Heights. I'm going to refer to Mr. DeJean for further details and information regarding this ordinance. I also did call him earlier this evening and ask him, since Mr. Murphy was not here this evening and he wrote the legislation with Mr. DeJean's guidance, I feel like we may want to consider putting this on first reading because there's some areas, gray areas that I questioned. So, Mr. DeJean.
Yes, that is correct. We should put this on first reading. I developed this legislation, as Madam President said, to initiate a process both for naming rights, paid naming rights on a building, and which is a sponsorship and service contributions. The reason I came up with this is, if you guys will, if all will remember, the Ross C.D. John Community Building, there was a resolution to put his name on the building. The building did come down, and there wasn't any resolution that said that his name was to be taken off and no longer used on any other building. So I felt there was a need to have that come before council. Also, there's been times in the city where a past mayor built a monument, put a flag on it, put his name on there without council approval. I don't think that's right. Also, there's a plaque on this city hall that a previous mayor also put a name on it without any sponsorship from this council or approval. So I thought we needed a process to do this. I want to suggest everyone send their questions to me so I can sit down with Mr. Murphy and we can recraft this and get it pushed through. Now, Mrs. Sabetta had a question about the paid agreement. The paid agreement is an agreement between the city and whoever the sponsor is. And so that, there's got to be some kind of form for that. I imagine the city can come up with that. I don't think that we have to do that, or it should be in this ordinance. But if you think it should be specified in here, we can do that. In other words, somebody comes and says, hey, I want to put my name on the side of City Hall, and I want to pay $1 million a year for that. Obviously, they have to sign some kind of agreement with the city specifying the length of time and the amount of money. I think that's a simple agreement. I don't know, Mr. Schmidlin, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's not a simple agreement to put together. But it seems pretty simple to me.
I'll put my best man on it.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a contract between the city and that person, so that's
Correct.
something that would come to council, of course.
I know that some others had concerns about the amount, because I didn't want it to be, in answering Mr. Ward's concern, to be a bottleneck. So if they wanted to put a swing set and sponsor it in the new Aquatic Center and put somebody's name on there, Mr. Ward felt that if all of those little sponsorships had to come through council, it would be cumbersome for them. So I did put a fee on there of $5,000 or more. So if somebody wanted to sponsor something, $5,000 or more, again, paid sponsor, then they would have to come to council for approval. Also, it's been suggested that we have a majority on both paid and service contributions to the city. So paid and service, which are two separate things, obviously. And they would like to see that as a majority vote of council. Now, Mr. Schmidt, it was suggested that we put a majority of council in there, or supermajority, but does it have to be specified 5 out of 7? Or can it say a majority of council?
If you're going to change the voting for this one specific ordinance, it needs to be specified, yeah.
Yeah, correct. And it does say 5 out of 7. Is that enough, or do you have to say supermajority of council?
You don't have to use the word supermajority, you'd say 5 out of 7.
Okay,
'Cause
so you
it's
can
normally
use
4
the
out of 7,
number.
right?
You can use the number.
You can use,
Okay, that was to answer Mrs. Sabetta's concern about that, so.
it is
So-
my favorite adjective, though, supermajority.
I'm sorry, that isn't what I said. I just wanted to know if 6 people showed up.
That's my question.
Yes, if you hit the 7, that means 5 out of 7. Do we have to wait for 7 people to be here?
Right, that was a,
That's why I wanted the majority or 5 members of council.
The proposed ordinance would have to address all those issues of those in attendance or those on council, if you wanted to change what the normal voting procedure is. And that brings up issues of whether, what the charter says, what does the charter say when it comes to voting? If you change the charter, that becomes a little more complicated.
Correct.
So it should be in line with the charter.
Yeah, and I hate to keep punning, but that's something, why I'm glad it's on first reading, you should
Right.
involve Paul. in that.
Yeah,
exactly.
okay. I have no problem with that.
Can I?
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yeah, I'm sorry. During the legislative meeting, we did speak about the agreement. I'm not really talking about the agreement. And I had mentioned that a naming rights agreement is a contract between 2 or more parties that allows one party the exclusive right to name a property, location, event for a set period of time. I just thought the word agreement needed to be defined. And in the minutes, Mrs. Tracy also agreed, Bob did agree, and I was surprised not to see it in here, because I think it's needed, so people understand what we're looking for. That was the only, I
My
want a
concern was
definition of
Words
the
were left
agreement.
out as well
Yeah,
in this one.
and there is a mistake on the legislation.
Madam President, it does.
Mr. DeJohn.
It does address the agreement. It says, agreement, all financially sponsored naming rights pursuant to section 155.03 above shall be subject of a written agreement between the city and the representative of the person or entity making the financial contribution. So I don't see what else we could add to that. So can you explain yourself, Madam President, of what you want that to say? Or get back to me? Because it's defined there. Am I not right?
Well, you can tweak the definition any way you want. Maybe it's something you want to have sent to the legislative committee.
So that's where this
it's come
came from.
and that's what's in the minutes.
That's what's in the minutes.
So I was surprised not to see it because Mr. Murphy did say that he would specify it out.
So
I
that's
know-
why it's best that we just send it, we just put it on first reading, let him review it. The questions go to Mr. Murphy and to Mr. DeJohn.
I'm sure you can tweak the language
And-
and work with
yeah.
you, but it sounds like you two have been working this through.
It's been going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one other question I have, Mr. Ward, do you want to see that $5,000 limit lowered? Do you want to see it raised?
Whatever. I think raising it to $2,500 or $25,000 probably makes sense, but really, it's up to you, whatever you guys want to do. I don't.
And I have no problem with that, so, unless everybody else does. But please send me your suggestions.
Thank you. Okay. So we
Excuse
will.
me,
ne-
Madam
oh,
President.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Okay, section 1, there is, no, section 3 at the end, back page, there's a typo.
What is it?
It's, it should say as soon as possible. It says stated soon as possible.
Oh, stated as soon as possible, as soon as possible.
Right.
Okay,
I got my red pen and I'm making notes.
I know.
okay.
C+.
Thank you. So we will move to ordinance number 2023-20.
Okay, Madam Chair, ordinance number 2023-20, an ordinance amending Chapter 121 of the codified ordinances of the city titled Council by amending Section 121.02L regarding committees.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJong, second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJong?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Balistreo?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJong,
Second it.
second by Mr. Monaco. Okay, this is an amendment to 121.02, section number 8, and shall be read as follows. Items discussed at the meeting and action taken by that committee shall be promptly transcribed within 7 business days. The member of the committee shall have the opportunity to review the minutes for approval and make any changes or deletions within 7 business days after receipt. After approval by the chairperson and member, the minutes shall be signed by the chairperson and kept in a record provided for that purpose, and such record shall be kept on file with the clerk of council and open to public inspection, as are other public records. So this is a change or an addition that would like to be added into this ordinance. Are there any questions with this change or addition? Mr. Balistreo?
A couple things. I don't like the time frame, number one, because there's always extenuating circumstances, and that lassos somebody into getting those minutes out within a certain time frame. The second thing is, what if the member and the chair don't agree on something? The chair should always supersede the member and present it to council, and it doesn't describe that here at all. You're assuming both people are going to make a corrections and agree to it and submit it to council. I'm just playing the what-if scenario, that if there is a discrepancy between the chair and the member, then the chair should have the final say whether those minutes are presented to council. Or go back to.
That has happened before in meetings where the chair has made a motion to bring it to council.
But if you're spelling it
Remember.
out, then it should be spelled out.
Right. So that needs to be added into that then.
So, again, I think it's something that probably should go back to first read. And at least those two questions that I would see to tweak it. Like I said, I don't like the time constraint on the city to do, within 7 business days. Although it's reasonable, I don't think it's in some cases practical. So there's always going to be extenuating circumstances. So there should be something in the language that says, under extenuating circumstances. I mean, we have a public work meeting that may be, 20 pages long, and it's just going to be not practical, and I understand that, to get that out in a week's time. So that's my 2 cents.
Mrs. Tressi, did you?
No, I agree with Mr. Balistreo, especially when we do public work meetings and minutes. They are really rather lengthy.
Right.
So maybe we can change the 7 days to 10 days, or to give them the opportunity to transcribe something that's 13 to 20 pages long.
And Mr. DeJong?
So the reason I put a time limit in here, it took me 3.5 weeks to get my minutes for the legislative meeting. So that's the first point. But if you want to make it 14 days, like our council minutes come back in 14 days, we can change it to that. I'm happy with that. So we'll make that change to it. But in answer, what was your other point, Mr. Balistreo, about About disagreeing, that's what it was.
About a disagreement
but-
between the members,
Yeah.
you know, there should be something that says the chair should still have the right to present those.
So
minutes ago.
where I disagree with that, there is a tape of these meetings, and if two people disagree on them, I know when Mrs. Benedetti was here, or Miss Benedetti, we always went back to her, and she listened to the tape, and she says, here's what the tape says, this is what I transcribed. So I don't see any problem with that. But I just want to avoid important facts in this meeting not being put into the minutes, and sometimes that does happen. So that's why I'm asking for that, for both members to agree, because sometimes these facts don't come out. And as I've said before in this council chambers, meetings, committee meetings are very misleading, because I've had people come back to me and recite them, what they said into the minutes. Specifically, Ms. Kramer about the solar panels. So those minutes are very, very sometimes misleading. So that's why I'm asking both to approve them and both to put their input in and to check back with the tape of the meeting. And I don't think that is unreasonable.
Mrs. Sabetta?
What if there's more than one member? So you're waiting around for all these people. The policy that is here now, Mrs. Fagan can tell you, is the meetings are typed up by the deputy, looked over by the clerk, and then sent to the chair.
That's true, and that's how it's been for the entire time I've ever been on council. And then the committee person member reviews it, obviously, before the council meeting. And if there's changes, then changes can be made.
So why do you have a problem with both? Because I don't see a bottleneck, because it specifies in there, each has to approve them within 7 days. We're going to make that now 14 days. So why is that a problem, that the other member that sits in the meeting wants to give input to what the minutes say? I don't see any problem with that whatsoever, unless you're trying to hide something. And I don't think that's the case. But the committee member is not a czar either. They, you know, obviously they have control of the committee, but they're not a czar. So that's just the way I feel.
Are we,
Ms. Tressi?
are we putting this on first reading?
We are.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, moving to ordinance number 2023-21. Mr. Schmidlin.
Madam Chair, ordinance number 2023-21, an ordinance amending Section 12 of Ordinance 2021-32 regarding compensation of certain Recreation Department employees therein and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Ballestero. Second. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Ballestrea?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Dijon?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Ballestero. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Mano. So this ordinance was also referred to the Finance Committee by Mr. Dijon this evening, so this will be placed on first reading. Mr. Dijon, just if you can please get with the clerk to
Madam Chair, if I could,
schedule that meeting, please.
I just want to stress the
Mayor?
importance of getting this done as soon as possible, because it's hard to find people to work these positions. The building's going to open, and we're not going to have anybody to work them. So it's asking for a moderate increase in just these two part-time positions. So I would hope that we can get this done ASAP, so we have people in place to take care of the facility.
Mr. Dijon.
Yes, Madam President, I'll get that meeting as soon as possible, but I wanted to ask Mr. Ward, there is a baseball commissioner. I thought we no longer had a baseball league here in the city.
That for many years now has been adult softball. So it goes back to Mr. Genetti was here, it was softball. It had nothing to do with the boys' Little League baseball.
And who is it now?
Mr. Barch,
Who is that? Mr.?
he's the softball commissioner.
I apologize, I didn't hear what his name was.
Barch,
Barch?
yes,
Has he been on our payroll?
he has.
Mr. Barch?
What are his, excuse me, Madam President, what are his
Mr.
duties?
DeJohn.
He oversees all aspects of our softball league, our co-ed softball league, our men's softball league.
So we have a men's league also?
We do, yeah. This is something that's been in place for many years. When Mr. Genetti was here, that's what he did. Maybe previous to my time, he may have been involved with the Little League, but he was always involved with the softball from when I started. And then when he moved on, the next gentleman was there, took over for him and did the same thing. It was all softball.
And how much time does he put in a year for this? I mean, because they're making almost as much as we make as council members.
I know you make a lot as a council members, I must say that, but outside of that, he does work a lot of evenings. You know, and those softball games, you know, they get a lot of people arguing back and forth and they can't agree on things, so they go deep into the night sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we'll move to motions, beginning with motion A.
Madam Chair, motions. A motion to authorize the sale of police department vehicles through CarMax. Vehicle number one, a 2016 Ford Explorer with 90,344 miles. Vehicle number two, can I do these all at the same time?
Yeah.
Vehicle number two, a 2017 Ford Explorer with 92,769 miles. Vehicle number three, a 2014 Ford Taurus with 92,611 miles. If anybody wants me to read the VIN numbers, you can see me afterwards.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Monaco, second by Mr. Balestrea. Chief Mealy has requested to sell these higher mileage vehicles. This is something that we do when the vehicles need to be removed from the fleet. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mr. DeJean?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. This motion has been approved. Next, we will move to new business. Is there any new business from council or comments this time? Mr. DeJohn?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to send out RFPs for engineering services for the city of Mayfield Heights.
I'll second.
Roll call on the, or is this, it's not even on our agenda.
It's not in the agenda.
We need to add it to the agenda.
I'd like to add.
I need
Add
a
it as a
motion
motion.
to add.
Motion to add.
And that would be a motion to authorize the administration to prepare and distribute an RFP for engineering services beginning January 1, 2024.
Correct.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
I'm sorry, do we have a first and a second? I lost track.
Well, first was,
Add it to the agenda.
and that
Adding
we
it
added
to
it
the
to the
agenda.
agenda. Mrs. Tressi, second to add it.
Okay, that's what I missed. Okay, thank you.
A roll call.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestrea?
No.
Mr. DeJean?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
No.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mr. Monaco?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes? This motion has been added to the agenda. Or it's passed, I'm sorry. Okay, now, new business and questions from council.
Are we going to vote
Else?
on this motion?
It passed. It passed.
It's passed. She read it.
She read it. Any other further questions from council?
So, just one thing. The reason I'm asking for this is we've had several major problems, which I think are major problems with our engineering services so far. So I think we've had this engineering company for a while now, so I think it's time that we solicit other services, and this current engineering company can also bid on it and see what they come up with. And I don't see any problem with that, so I really like to know from Mr. Balestria and Mrs. Sabetta what problem they have with that.
That's just their vote, so maybe they can contact you and talk to you about it.
Yeah, I'm sure they
Okay.
won't, but keep that in mind, there has been problems and the way they voted. Thank you.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mrs. Tressi,
Second.
second by Mr. Valestria. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone. We are now adjourned. Hi, Jew, but